This is one of the most famous landmarks in London medical history. This pump right here. We're on Broadwick Street in Soho, which in 1854 was Broad Street, in the middle of the slums and rookeries which constituted Soho at that time. And on the 8th of September 1854, on the instructions of the Dr. John Snow, the handle to this pump was removed so that water could no longer be drawn from it, because Snow had recognised that this pump, the water from this pump, was the source of the outbreak of cholera that had been ravaging Soho, killing over 500 people in the previous weeks. Cholera had first arrived in London in 1831. It had swept across from Asia. It was an absolutely terrifying disease, very, very rapid in its progress, very indiscriminate in who it attacked. And cholera epidemics were brief but extremely intense. Cholera was a horrifying disease with incredibly rapid onset. The first thing you knew about it was terrible stomach cramps and diarrhea, and then you'd quite often die, often the same day, just in a pool of your own stinking excrement. The prevailing theory at the time was that filth diseases, like cholera as they were called, infectious and contagious diseases, were spread by a general miasma, a general pollution of the atmosphere, which might sort of emanate from the ground or be part of the air, or be spread in any number of ways. People would try and protect themselves against them by inhaling sweet-scented things and so on. This was actually the framework within which John Snow himself was working. It would be another generation before Louis Pasteur and Robert Koch, and the idea that these diseases were actually spread by germs and bacteria. So Snow still believed that cholera was being communicated by a miasma, but he believed that the miasma was particularly concentrated in the water supply. So this legendary moment is commemorated not only by this pump here, but also by a pub, the John Snow. So this is the John Snow. It's full of John Snow memorabilia. And it even has a part of the legendary pump handle that was removed. It was only renamed the John Snow quite recently, and it's a symbol, I guess, in that sense, of how the legend of John Snow's story has grown with the years. And as is often the case with medical and scientific breakthroughs, the story that's accreted around it isn't quite, nothing is quite as it seems, and nothing is quite the way it was. The site of the pump, for example, is not actually the site of the pump. The pump was actually over here, much closer to the pub, a few yards down the road. The version of the John Snow story that we hear these days is that by removing the handle from the Broad Street pump, he saved countless lives in the middle of a cholera epidemic. That by identifying the water in the pump as the cause of contagion, he moved away from traditional theories of sort of miasma and kind of general pollution, and towards modern theories of germs and bacteria and infection. And finally, that it was John Snow's work in this that became the main impetus for the extraordinary revolution in London's sanitation that would happen in the next decade with Joseph Bazalgette's enormous project to remodel London's sewers. What was really original about John Snow's work, what was really groundbreaking, was the statistical method behind it. He started plotting the locations of all the deaths in the cholera epidemic, and he discovered that they all clustered around water pumps, and particularly around this pump in Broad Street. He then investigated the people living in these slums around Broad Street and found that the people who were least affected were the brewery workers, because they were drinking beer rather than water. So John Snow's statistical work was groundbreaking, but actually this great moment when the pump handle was taken off the pump had very little effect. It was largely symbolic, because by the time he'd managed to persuade the parish to remove the pump handle, the cholera epidemic had pretty much burnt itself out anyway, so it's unlikely that he saved any lives. And also the idea, which is frequently now attached to his story, that this was a pivotal moment in the campaign to revolutionise London sanitation, is also unfortunately not true. Snow's report when he finally produced it, gathered very little attention at the time. But John Snow's work, as would be recognised with hindsight, was a very important contribution to a public health movement that had been building in London since cholera had arrived in the early 1830s. So the real significance of John Snow's story is that it's the birth of epidemiology, it's the birth of statistical analysis, and it shows how many lives you can save and how much you can improve conditions with proper statistical surveys. But of course, this is something we recognise clearly now, but wasn't recognised at the time. So John Snow, although he went on and made other pioneering medical discoveries, never really lived to see his work on the Broad Street pump come to any sort of practical fruition. But then, on the other hand, he did achieve the great accolade that Londoners give to their own, which is to have a pub named after him.